I don't want to hark back to what I just said a minute ago, but I do think it's about communicating. I feel that while, if you're doing a very good job, if nobody knows about it, then you might as well kind of not be. I think the way we need to communicate as a college and to make sure that all our opportunities and things are open are to move away from how we deal in the terms of things like email, because it's just too much information. It's very you read your email and then it's quite hard to get back to it again if you don't know where it quite was, and information gets missed and important messages get diluted. So I think the most important point for me would be to try and find new ways of doing that and try and open up communication so that the exec aren't a kind of far away group of people on Norman Gallery who you don't feel you can engage with. So things like improving our website a lot. I've spoken to a few people in detail about this, but making it so that it is a useful tool, and when you go on your computer, you do want to look like Facebook, Duo, the JCR website, and that's really becomes a reliable and consistent place to store information. I think we can also look at doing things like Twitter feeds, things like blogs. I mean, they might not work, but if we try them for 6 weeks and if people do find them useful and do find them a good way to get engaged with what everybody's up to and what the exec are up to on your behalf as a college, then it's worth a try, definitely.
It's exactly the same point, engaging with and listening to the JCR. I think we've all clearly identified that is something that's perhaps missing, that whilst a great job is being done, if you don't know about it, if you don't know how it affects you, if as an exec we don't know if it is affecting you positively, then there is something missing. In terms of ways to solve that, I think a really little point, but perhaps a very important one, if any of you have ever got a duck email from me, I always include my mobile number. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, it's not just email, you can ring me, you can come and see me. Ways of fixing this issue, I mentioned again in my answer to the first question, the possibility of course reps. Another possibility is additional JCR meetings of a very different type, where the exec are really held accountable by you as a JCR. You all have the opportunity to come and ask us questions, have things explained in very simple terms as to what we've been doing, why it's good for you, and for you to say, actually, these are the problems I'm concerned about, what are you doing about these? There's a lot of work as part of being your senior man, and we need to make sure that your time as senior man is managed effectively to be dealing with these problems, and there needs to be that structure and system in place, which doesn't exist yet, to make sure those problems being dealt with are the problems that are important to you.
Thanks, Josh. Can you hear me at the back? Good, cheers. Yeah, communication is very important. I'm happy to put my Facebook, Twitter, and phone number at the end of emails. I think the most important point on my manifesto is that it's the last one, last and most important. Ensure that the JCR is able to adequately push its needs as regards college office. It's a bit wordy. I'll put brackets at the end. Ensure JCR backroom improvement. But what I'm really getting at is, from the word go, I'm going to build a strong relationship with college office. I already know quite a few of them by name, and essentially a lot of the things that you do as senior man that are noticeable to people around the college are going to involve going through the office. And so I'm just going to get on the case straight away. If I was elected senior man, then this term as senior man-elect, I would work very hard to fulfill all the obligations of the final point of my manifesto. Thank you, and I'll pass it along to Charlie.
I'm going to follow the crowd a little bit and say that communication is something on my manifesto that I think is very important, because you go around talking to people and it's surprising how few people know who the exec are, even what they do, not involved with the sorts of decisions they make. Like, everybody knows where Norman Gallery is, and you know probably that you could go up there if you've got an issue you want sorting out, but the issues people have aren't that pressing. It can be a bit intimidating going all the way up those spiral staircases. So I think the exec need to do the running. Gestures, things like open exec meetings, for one thing. I'm not saying every exec meeting should be open, but a few times a term if people can come, see how things work, see what people are actually doing, and then ask questions in a situation that's designed for questions to be asked, not a JCR meeting where it feels like you're interrupting a bit. Then just Facebook is the easiest way, a Facebook group, like the people, the freshers and the people on the freshers group. Before you came, you could ask things like, do we get a kettle, that you don't really need to write a letter about, but you feel better about knowing, and you can get an answer straight away. If you try to do these things by email, which is a bit clunky and feels a bit formal, or if you do try to do things through the JCR website, which will require a lot of effort and think people getting used to it, then I don't think it will be as effective as if you just do it through Facebook, which almost all of us are on, I'm sure, and it doesn't feel like you're doing work when you're on it. It's the easiest way to get two-way informal communication with everybody knowing what's going on. But if you don't mind, I will backtrack a bit, because that's not the most important thing on my manifesto. The most important thing is just above that, about working to preserve the lifestyles and traditions we hold dear. Only slightly more important than people thinking things are working is things actually working. And that's what I would do, working with the people who make the decisions that affect us, college office, university authorities, to make sure that they really work, and then communicating them back to you.
I think least likely to be able to make happen in its entirety is probably my point about wanting to change and improve the Constitution. It's a massive, massive job. Other colleges, Mildet, for example, have, talking to Andy, have a couple of pages of summary and the Constitution itself. So the couple of pages of summary can be referred to as an actual readable document that can tell you at a glance what you need to know, and then for anyone who's really interested, you can go further and read the entire document if that's what you want. I think it's a very important job that needs doing, but it's one that is going to evolve with the consultation of the JCR that I plan to put in place. It's not something that's going to happen immediately, and it will be, I envisage, a job that's left to finish at least by whoever became senior man next year.
When I was writing my manifesto, I was very aware of two things, the 100-word limit, and also the fact that I was going to be called to account on it the following year if I was elected as senior man. So hopefully I think that all of the things on there are fairly realistic. Of any of them, the only one I think could go differently is the first one, which is to ensure that we can keep the post-offer open days no matter what, despite 38-week lets. They might not exist in the exact same format that they exist today. If we can keep them, it might mean changing them in some way. It might mean that they're on over a longer period of time. So you could say that I hadn't fully fulfilled that first point exactly. So I think, yeah, that's how I'd answer that question.
I think for me, it would be my point about increasing the profile of charitable and environmental concerns in the college. That's something I feel quite strongly about, and I know from talking to you, canvassing, that a lot of people agree with me, but these are sorts of things that are difficult to do overnight. You can't just set up some sort of connection and expect people to flood at it straight away. It will only be after a few years when we really get involved with local charities it will only be once we've got connections established with charities and we know how things work and we know what people are really interested in. Springing these things up overnight this time next year, they may not be as established as I'd like to be, but I'm confident that setting the ball rolling is a very worthwhile thing to do, and in 10, 20 years' time, then I see no reason why Castle can't be at the bottom at the top of that tree, rather than at the bottom, as it is now.
I'd like to kind of echo what Ben said, in that I wouldn't have put something on my manifesto if I didn't believe that I could do it, because it'd be kind of a pointless promise, and empty promises are never going to be a good a good representation of me as a senior man. I think the area where we could potentially run into difficulty is my point about improving the system by which we allocate rooms to finalists and livers in. Because as much as we can devise a fantastic a system that suits as many people, the JCR feels is a fair one, there are always going to be people who will be disappointed if they can't live in and wanted to. It's something I think we're going to have to learn to accept a little bit, and that's where I see maybe I fail a few individuals.
Well, the degree that I study is physics, and it is extremely demanding for time. I'm not going to lie to you. But I did quite well in my first year. I'm pleased with how I did. And I have an awful lot of commitments. So anyone who's looked at my manifesto has noticed I'm part of an awful lot of clubs that I have to balance. And one of them's rowing, and that takes forever. And I have good time management skills. Another point that I would make is that my degree is a 4-year course, and I don't have a dissertation to do in my 3rd year. And most of my marks do come from my 4th year. So it's not going to have potentially the devastating impact that it could do.
I do an English degree, and as I'm sure you all know, we do an awful lot of work. The one small advantage is that we do have a very flexible timetable, which means that I can read at the weekends, in the evenings, in the holidays, and get my work done then. I don't have hours of lectures through the week that will stop me doing my job as senior man. Like Ben, like all of us, I do a lot in college at the moment, and almost all of that will have to take the back seat or go entirely if I'm fortunate enough to be elected. Rowing, for instance, will go, because nobody really likes early mornings that much. And I think it's important that that your commitment to the JCR and to the role as senior man takes almost the top role, if not ahead of your degree, then certainly alongside it with equal weighting.
Although as much as I'd like to say, and my diary does suggest, my beautiful diary, for those of you who have seen it, does suggest that I do have fabulous time management skills. Those of you who have seen me in the library till 3 the last week probably would disagree. The evidence seems to suggest otherwise. I also do English like Charlie. I think there is a lot of flexibility in that, but I think it's most important is an attitude. I mean, there will be times when senior man duties and academic commitments will be piling up, but the reason I'm there at 3 in the library until 3 in the morning in the library is because I have to do it, and I realise that. And I think you make sacrifices of other things that are less important just to get, and maybe sleep is one of them, just to get stuff done on the short term. I think you have to be aware that that might be a possibility, and I very much am.
I, as well, am doing a 4-year degree. I have no summative work during the year doing maths and chemistry other than chemistry labs, because I only do half chemistry. They're only for 6 weeks of the year. I don't actually have much pressure during the term time, other than having to revise for the summer exams, which can be done, when no one is being particularly concerned with events going on the college level anyway. That's pretty much it, really.